This podcast is brought to you by Parlay Play Fantasy Sports. Use my referral code RotoBrady. Get that sweet, sweet deposit bonus. They got paid contests coming to a state near you. They're giving out boosts. They're giving out bonuses. They're slashing lines all day long, hopping those player prop DFS contests. It's a real fun platform they got over there. And this podcast is sponsored by King Arthur Capital Group. Fund your fight camp, showing fighters how to leverage credit and capital so they can treat their career like a business. And folks, this is if you caught my last interlude episode with David King Arthur McElroy, that was what we discussed in that episode, both his career as a fighter and King Arthur Capital Group. I am very excited to partner up with King Arthur Capital Group and share this information with as many people out there in the combat sports world as possible, with finances and payment and making a career and a life for yourself being a constant topic of conversation in this sport. I think everybody needs to go check out King Arthur Capital Group. And, if you're looking to, leverage credit and capital, treat your fight career like a business. If you're looking to, look into investments outside of fighting, financial management and consultation, give David King Arthur McElroy a ring. Follow him on Instagram at mc.elroy. That's EMSEE.ELROY, MC.Elroy. That's David McElroy. And then King Arthur Capital Group at King Arthur Capital Group on Instagram. And what is up, everybody? This is Brady Grove bringing you episode 205 of the Tap That MMA podcast. We've got UFC Seattle this weekend. We've got a lot of combat sports this week, too. My God, we've got ACA 201, LFA 229, Itama versus Franklin, PFL Pittsburgh, Fundora versus Thurman. For my picks on all that stuff and more, follow me on Twitter at RotoBrady. Follow me on Instagram at RotoBrady MMA. Follow the podcast at Tap That MMA Podcast on YouTube and Spotify. Now available on Apple Podcasts and Amazon Music. I was absent last week in part because of the NCAA tournament. Didn't know how many people would be paying attention to me, let alone, or to the UFC, let alone me. Back this week. Check out my most recent interlude episodes. I've got a really exciting one on the books for a couple exciting ones on the books for Sunday. So look out for those as well. Go check out my recent one with David King Arthur McElroy talking about King Arthur Capital Group. And was there more that I wanted to say about that? Now, UFC London, not a lot of people were happy about it. I don't necessarily blame them. There's good fights on every card, but, this one, especially when it's going on at the same time as the NCAA tournament, which, by the way, would be a great time to take a one-week hiatus in the highest action week of postseason college basketball of the entire year. Maybe take the week off. Maybe that's not how Dana White and the UFC brass think, but, I'm committed to watching the UFC every week, and it was a challenge amidst all the very important college basketball games that were going on. Folks, also, the UFL season starts tomorrow, Friday, March 27th. Keep an eye out for my UFL gambling pieces that come out through RotoBaller and my MMA DFS values picks articles that also come out through RotoBaller. I got to get out a preseason futures, a week one picks article, my MMA DFS values picks article, and this podcast all at some point within basically, the next 18 hours or so. So I'm going to try to get as many picks out there for all the different combat sports events as I possibly can as usual. And now we've got 13 fights for UFC Seattle, starting off with Alexia Thenara and Bruna Brazil at strawweight. Thenara is the minus 800 favorite. Bruna Brazil, the plus 550 underdog. To talk about Thenara first. So she is 3-0 in the UFC, counting the Contender Series, 13-1 as a pro. She submitted Molly McCann in her real UFC debut and beat Loma Luke Boumé by unanimous decision, outstriking her 44-30 with 5 takedowns to nil. 10 minutes of control time in that fight. Bruna Brazil, a little bit older, little bit bigger. Actually, will have a shorter reach by a couple inches, but is it 2 inches taller? very up and down run in the UFC. She beat Molly McCann too by unanimous decision. She lost handily to Loma Luke Bume by unanimous decision back February of 2024. Other wins ever Sheen Ming on Road to UFC. She kind of got relegated to Road to UFC. And Shauna Bannon. She has losses to Denise Gomez, Loma, Kong Wang, and Ketlin Souza. Look, it is proven, it's been hard to finish Bruno Brazil. Denise Gomez is the only one to do it so far. Kong Wang wasn't able to do it. I'm inclined to say, like, maybe Bruno Brazil doesn't have as much a weakness on the ground as Molly McCann does. Alexa Denara is just a very well-rounded fighter, and she's not old. She's not like super young, but she's not old. She has been almost flawless in her professional career so far. I think minus 800 is fair. I will not blame anybody ever for the first fight of the night going with an underdog in a women's strawweight, women's flat, whatever fight. Plus 550 for Bruno Brazil. Maybe you think that's a value. I would go Thanara by decision minus 125, but I don't think there's anything wrong with Thanara to like cover the spread minus 3.5 is minus 210. How is that worse than the decision? I guess it takes in more outcomes, sure. Inside the distance for Thanara is plus 160. I like her in DFS. It's hard to pick exactly how she ends up winning that. I like her in a parlay, even though it's just minus 800. Gun to my head, I would say minus 125 for the decision. But otherwise, maybe inside the distance plus 160 is a little bit better of a value there. I don't feel super strong on any of those just because Thainara is such a heavy favorite, and I think that makes sense. Next up, we got a bantamweight matchup between Ricky Simone and Adrian Yanez. Simone is the minus 150 favorite. Yanez, the plus 130 underdog. Let's talk about Yanez, the underdog first. Been a rough go for him over the last few years. He has one win since June of 2022 when he knocked out Tony Kelly. He got knocked out by Rob Font, knocked out by Jonathan Martinez. He's coming off a split decision loss to Daniel Marcos in what was a very close fight December of 2024. I cannot believe he has not fought more recently than December of 2024. The one win was a first round knockout over Vinicius Salvador, now all the way back in May 2024. That's closing up on 2 years ago. Ricky Simone is a bit smaller, but not by as much as maybe you'd think when thinking about Yanez's dimensions. And Simone, only like a little bit over a year older, born in August of 1992. And, he's had tough things thrown at him as well. He's had a lot more fights. He's been a lot more active. He fought 3 times in 2025 and went 2-1 in that time. He knocked out Javid Basharat, beat Cameron Smotherman by unanimous decision. He is coming off a unanimous decision loss to Rayoni Barcelos. Like, Ricky Simone is super unpredictable. Those losses in that time came to Vinicius Oliveira, Mario Batista, and Song Yadong. Ricky Simone is a roller coaster ride, but I still trust him a lot more than I trust Adrian Yanez. Adrian Yanez has been finished a lot. Simone, has always been a good mixture of outcomes. The Barcelos fight was disappointing, but it was his third fight in 2025. Maybe Yanez is fresh, but this is a fight against Ricky Simone is a really tough one to hop back into when you haven't fought in well over a year and you have one win in the last 4 years. So with that, I don't feel that's a lot of variables to try to pin down. I like Ricky Simone money line minus 150. Hit it. I think he's got more ways to win this fight. And Yanez is a big question mark right now. Next up, we got Navajo Sterling versus Bruno Lopez at light heavyweight. Navajo Sterling is the minus 650 favorite. Lopez the plus 475 underdog. Let's talk about the underdog, Bruno Lopez, first. So, lost in his first Contender Series attempt, got knocked out by Brinson Ribeiro. Won in a second try against Mikhail Sazhiniani by second round knockout. That was August of 2024. Won his real UFC debut by unanimous decision against Magomed Ghaziazulov. That was 29-28 on all three judges' scorecards. His five takedowns ended up being a big factor there. He is coming off of getting knocked out in round one, May 31st, 2025, against Dustin Jacoby. Navajo Sterling will have a 5-inch reach advantage. He is 2 inches taller. He is also about 4 years younger. Undefeated as a pro, 8-0. Knocked out Philip Latu on the Contender Series. Then is coming off three straight unanimous decision wins over Tuco Tokos, Ivan Erzlan, and Rodolfo Beato. So I wish he would have finished one of those three dudes that he's fought after the Contender Series. But, Navajo Sterling might have had some hiccups in some of those fights where it's like, I mean, he was close to finishing Ivan Erzlan. That was a very thorough win. That was 29-27 and 29-28, but it reads statistically better for him. He had a knockdown. He vastly outstruck Ivan Erzlan. He got three takedowns. He did get taken down three times by Tuco Tokos. I think that's probably where the danger lies for Navajo Sterling isn't giving up takedowns here. But even so, if he's just able to, even if it's 3 to 5 takedowns, if he's able to get back up, and because let's say Bruno Lopez against Magomed ended up with almost 10 minutes of control time. So Navajo certainly can't let that happen. But I think it's at much less risk here. I think when fight is standing up, that's Navajo Sterling's world. And I think a decision or a knockout is, certainly on the table against the Brazilian Cowboy. His only two professional losses are both by first round knockout. So Navajo Sterling, I would say I think to cover the spread might be a tough one because I could see Bruno Lopez stealing around with the takedowns. Maybe even I could see it being the last round and Navajo Sterling maybe being like if you're a Navajo Sterling backer, especially by decision, be like, God, I hope he doesn't lose too much steam here. Sterling by knockout is minus 175. Sterling by decision is plus 325. I think if you're gonna go Sterling by knockout, go Sterling by knockout in round one. You're getting plus 225 when otherwise the knockout prop straight up is minus 175. I would either go Navajo by decision plus 325 or Navajo to win this by knockout in round one plus 225. Take a good look at those and hit them. Next up, we've got a women's flyweight matchup between Casey O'Neill and Gabriela Fernandez. Gabriela Fernandez, fight is pick'em. Both minus 110. Love to see it. Love to see closely handicapped matchups. Forgot those existed. Let's take a look at Gabriela Fernandez. 5'6" with a 66-inch reach, born August of 1993. She lost her first two fights in the UFC by unanimous decision. That makes up 2 of her 3 professional losses. Those were to Jasmine Jasduvicius, no blame there, and then Teresa Bleda.
But I'm not impressed by your performance, and I look forward to.
It's been a lot better since then, though. The win by unanimous decision over Julia Stoliarenko. That's a weird matchup for a lot of. She at least got a 30-27 there. Stoliarenko, obviously, kind of a submission threat. It makes people, do things maybe they normally wouldn't. But she got that split decision win over Carly Judas, and she was able to submit Kong Wang in that upset and work her way into the women's flyweight rankings. So she's on a good run here. Casey O'Neill. King Casey O'Neill, born in 1997. That's crazy. It seems like she's been around so much longer, and at the UFC level, she has been. Casey O'Neill, she has suffered from a lack of activity, and it's crazy because when she beat Luana Santos, it felt like, yeah, Casey O'Neill's back, and now we're closing up on that being that's like 2.5 years ago. It felt like it was yesterday at UFC 305. Only 2 losses as a professional, and they both came March of 2023 and December of 2023 on UFC pay-per-view cards to Jennifer Maia by unanimous decision. It was a closely contested fight, 29-28 on 2 of the 3 judges' scorecards. Then she got submitted by Ariane De Silva. But her last fight was a win. She has wins over Roxanne Modafferi, Antonina Shevchenko, Lara Propocio, and Shayna Dobson in the UFC. Those first 3 fights in the UFC were all inside the distance. Here's the thing. Gabriela Fernandez against Carly Judas, that was a very close competitive fight. You could have argued that either way. The control time ended up being big for Gabriela Fernandez in that Judas fight. We've seen her take losses, and one of them was one that you would hope that she wouldn't have taken. The Jasmine loss, I can absolutely understand. The Kong Wang fight was obviously a skill set mismatch where, still for anybody that gets Kong Wang on the ground, she might be a minus 1,000 favorite, as we've seen, but she's going to be in danger if you get her on the ground. Um, Casey O'Neill, even with the lack of activity here, I still think the ceiling is higher for Casey O'Neill. I mean, she's going to have a 3-inch reach advantage, even though they're the same height. She is still, about 4 years younger, actually a little over 4 years younger. She still has less professional fights. She's just been around the UFC longer. So if we're talking pick 'em here, give me Casey O'Neill, money line, minus 110, hit it. Next up, we've got a heavyweight matchup. Oh my goodness, between Marcin Tybura and Tyrell Fortune.
I want to tell me what you see. Let's go ahead and see by the fight what you saw in the ring.
It was supposed to be Walter Walker versus Marcin Tybura, and Tyrell Fortune, the longtime Bellator competitor, recently signed by the UFC at the age of 35, is going to be making his UFC debut against a really tough guy to make your UFC debut against. I also said that about Deliha. That was also against Marcin Tybura, a tough one to make. So Tyrell Fortune is interesting because this is a guy that spent his entire professional career with Bellator up until Bellator was gone. And it always seemed like he was like coming short of expectations, and I guess he was. He was with Bellator since 2016. But the losses, he got knocked out by Tim Johnson. He's lost a split decision to Linton Vassell, and he got submitted by Sergey Bilos Tinney. Yeah, that deserves that.
I want to tell me what you see. Let's go ahead and see by the fight what you saw in the ring.
But he's beaten Sergey once before at Bellator 294. He lost the subsequent fight. Knocked out Rakeem Cleveland. He's beaten Matt Mitrione a long time ago. Jack May, Saeed Salma. He's fought a lot of those, and Marcelo Gome fought a lot of the like who's who of the Bellator heavyweights of that era. I love that era of the Bellator heavyweights. And he's coming off 3 straight wins since his last loss in PFL in 2024. He beat Myron Dennis for the LXF title, beat Tony Lopez for the RUF title, and he's coming off a 3rd-round TKO finish over Demorio Dennis. Tony Lopez and Myron Dennis certainly like veterans of the heavyweight division. That's not an easy one to just like be taking on the fly, while you're looking for a bigger opportunity. Demorio Dennis isn't like an incredibly impressive win, but it's good to see that Tyrell Fortune was staying busy in 2025, got 3 fights, 3 wins, all finishes. That's a good spot to be coming into the UFC for. And Marcin Tybura got knocked out by Ante DeLiha in his last fight, September last year. He was like, this is a tough one to call, and I haven't even said what the odds are yet. Tyrell Fortune is actually favored, minus 138. Tybura, the plus 118 underdog. That is, that's really tempting. So Marcin Tybura got knocked out by Ante DeLiha, September of 2025. Before that, he had won 2 straight over Yonata Denise by knockout and by unanimous decision over Mick Parkin, who is currently still a ranked UFC heavyweight. His last 4 losses going back to October of 2021, with plenty of wins in the middle over Walt Harris, Alexander Romanov, Blagoy Ivanov, Tai Tuivasa. Last 4 losses, Alexander Volkov by unanimous decision. He got knocked out by Tom Aspinall, submitted by Sergey Spivak, and knocked out by Ante DeLiha. I don't know, I don't know. I know Marcin Tybura is 40 years old, coming off of a knockout loss to another guy who's pretty old. This is a UFC debut for Tyrell Fortune, where he hasn't fought anybody like Marcin Tybura in several years. You know, overall, he's got one loss by knockout, one loss by submission, one loss by decision. I mean, look, like the best way for Tyrell Fortune to handle this is get Marcin Tybura to the ground, beat him up, hit him with hard shot. Like, you know, it'd be to rough him up, get him down, and that's a hard thing to do is get Marcin Tybura down. That's always the best laid plans. But, you know, Tyrell Fortune, the vast majority of his career wins are by knockout TKO. That's where, you know, if I was going to take Tyrell Fortune, I wouldn't necessarily feel the need to go method of victory. I mean, it's minus 138. For his UFC debut here, considering the competition he's been fighting lately, considering that I think people forget that some heavyweights, it doesn't necessarily matter if they're 40, especially if they're fighting guys that are 35 to 40. Maybe we see the difference here between 35 and 40. And honestly, I'm rooting for Tyrell Fortune. I thought it was a very unusual time that the UFC chose to sign him at the age of 35 when they're cutting a bunch of heavyweights that are in the heavyweight rankings. But I have to go Marcin Tybura money line here plus 118. I think that by decision makes the most sense. That's plus 450. I don't think you have to go that crazy. I think that submission is plus 350. That could be on the table. I don't think you need to do that. I would just go Marcin Tybura money line plus 118. Hit it. God, that's an interesting one. Hopefully it's a good fight so people can appreciate it and don't spend the entire time dumping on it, because that happens with a good amount of heavyweight matchups that I think are interesting at first. Lightweight, we got Chase Hooper versus Lance Gibson Jr. Chase Hooper, the minus 310 favorite. Lance Gibson Jr., the plus 260 underdog. Let's talk about Lance Gibson Jr. first. His UFC debut was a split decision loss to Bobby King Green. No shame in that, especially when I think that fight was on, you know, pretty short notice. A little bit of background on Lance Gibson Jr., if you're not familiar. 9-2 as a professional. Comes out of Canada. His dad was in the UFC. It's well documented. 4 wins by knockout, 3 by submission, 2 by decision. Overall, he has a 5-1 record in Bellator. Never fought anybody crazy over there. And he wasn't the most active from 2022 to, you know, through 2023. But, and like, you know, it was because of the short notice opportunity. He got the opportunity in the UFC. But he put on a, you know, competitive performance against Bobby King Green. Now, Chase Hooper, another roller coaster ride here. Like, you know, he had a 5-fight winning streak where at one, he looked physically souped up. He looked stronger on the feet. The ground game looked wizard-like, even though sometimes it was a lot more demonstrative than it was practical, especially against Jim Miller. But you really like look at what happened in that 5-fight winning streak, like beat Nick Fiore. Outstruck him 149-51. That was a big performance. His last knockout was against Felipe Colares, May of 2022. That was that long ago? Jesus. Submitted Jordan Leavitt, submitted Vyacheslav Borshov, submitted Clay Guida, beat Jim Miller by unanimous decision. Look, Jordan Leavitt is a tough guy to beat. You know, we just saw him come off that decision win over Yadier Del Valle as a big underdog. But the last 3, the guys he's fought over the last 2 years that he's beaten have been old veteran, or like, you know, Slava Claus, who it's not like he's young, but as much as I love Slava Claus, he is by the majority done mostly losing in the UFC. And then what? Against Alexander Hernandez, gets knocked out in the first round. Chase Hooper's still young, born in 1999, obviously has a very, you know, is very talented when it comes to grappling. Lance Gibson hasn't been submitted in his pro or amateur career. He's been knocked out and he's lost. That was one to Vladimir Tokov, and then he lost the decision to Bobby King Green. You know, there's nothing here that I really love for Chase Hooper. You know, if you take a method of victory double chance, like by decision or sub, I think that's the best that you're going to do. If that ends up being a solid number, then so be it. But, and I think that that is probably the most likely outcome, you know, like Lance Gibson Jr. against Bobby Green on short notice, which does weird things for the results of a fight. Like, it doesn't mean that if they got a full camp, Lance Gibson would be that competitive with Bobby Green. It doesn't mean that, you know, he wouldn't do better. We just don't know. This is a guy that's mostly competed at Bellator, and this is going to be his second UFC fight against a guy that was born in 1999 and, you know, is quite experienced in the UFC. Chase Hooper's by submission and by decision is probably where I would go. But Lance Gibson Jr. can certainly make this a competitive fight, and plus 260 underdog, plus 260 on the money line, I don't think is crazy for Lance Gibson Jr. That's what I'm going to be thinking hard about as the card approaches. And by the way, the card does start Saturday at 5 p.m. Eastern time over there in Seattle, Washington. Next up, we've got a lightweight match between Ignacio Bahamondes and Tafik Musayev. Tafik Musayev is the plus 270 underdog. Ignacio Bahamondes, the minus 320 favorite. Let's talk about the favorite, Ignacio Bahamondes, first. So 17-6 as a pro, born in 1997, 6'3" with a 75-inch reach. He has won 3 of his last 4. He has won 6 of his last 8. Wins over Roosevelt Roberts, Rong Zhu, Trey Ogden, Christos Giagos, Manuel Torres, and Jalen Turner. Finished the latter 2, and those are the best names that he's faced. He is coming off a unanimous decision loss June of last year to Rafael Fazia. That was 30-27 on all 3 judges' scorecards. The other loss was to Ludwig Klein by unanimous decision and John McDessie all the way back in April of 2021 by split decision. It has been mostly finishes in the UFC for Ignacio Bahamondes. Tafik Musayev will have a 6-inch reach disadvantage. He is also 6 inches shorter than Ignacio Bahamondes. Little background on Tafik Musayev, why I would love to root for this guy, why I would love to look for a reason that this guy ends up winning. 22-6 out of Azerbaijan. Love fighters from Azerbaijan. I love their flag. He is 36 years old, 18 career wins by knockout, 1 loss by knockout, 4 losses by submission, 2 submission wins, 2 decision wins, 1 decision loss. In total, through Ryzen and Bellator, he is 8-2. Formerly beat Patricky Pitbull back in December of 2019 for the Ryzen Tournament Championship. Losses, you know, are not to bad people, especially like the last 3, which are his only 3 since October of 2014. Roberto de Souza, Alexander Shabali, and Maidbek Orobai in his UFC debut. I love the Ryzen experience. I love the Bellator experience where he's also beaten Sydney Outlaw. I love that he's beaten Pitbull. I don't think the last 3 losses he's had have been bad losses. He's been finished in his last 3 losses, all 3 of them. It's just that he's 36. He did not look good in the Orobai fight. I think that against a guy like Ignacio Bahamondes, who is 28 years old, has a ridiculous size advantage on him. It's going to be real hard for Tafik Musayev to get in the pocket, land, you know, the ground and pounder, get the takedowns, and ultimately work towards any, you know, effective ground and pound. It's just really hard for me to see Tafik Musayev getting off effective offense in this fight at the level he'll need to. Can he land a finishing shot? Perhaps. But it's been really hard to finish Ignacio Bahamondes in the UFC, and he's fought some really good fighters. So give me Ignacio Bahamondes. Like, after I said all that, minus 315 seems more than fair. Obviously, I'm not going with that, but I will go Ignacio Bahamondes inside the distance, minus 120, hit it. I would love if Tafik Musayev won, but I would also be incredibly surprised for his opponent this weekend. Next up, we've got a lightweight matchup between Terrence T-Rex McKinney and Kyle Nelson. T-Rex is the minus 173 favorite. Kyle Nelson, the plus 148 underdog. Let's talk about Kyle Nelson, the underdog first. Coming off a win by unanimous decision over Matt Frivola, he's now won 4 of his last 5 fights, the only loss being the knockout against Steve Garcia. And in fact, he only has 1 loss since July of 2022 when he fought Jai Herbert. He's had some rougher, it was a rough first handful of fights in the UFC for Kyle Nelson. He's not young. He was born in 1991, but he's won 4 of his last 5 against Blake Builder. Okay. Fernando Padilla. Okay. Knocked out Bill Algeo. All right. And then won a unanimous decision against Matt Frivola in what was, a tough fight. He got a knockdown there. They each landed 2 takedowns. He outstruck Frivola, and it was a 29-28 for 2 judges, 30-27 on Sal Diamato's card. Terrence T-Rex McKinney. And by the way, let's take a look. How often Frivola's been finished? Twice, 3 times, 4 times in the UFC. By Diego Ferreira, by knockout, Matt Sales by submission, Billy Quarantillo by knockout, and Steve Garcia by knockout. Terrence T-Rex McKinney. What a talking about roller coasters, if that's the theme of this week. Terrence T-Rex McKinney is the roller coaster of all roller coasters.
I want to tell me what you see. Let's go ahead and see by the fight what you saw in the ring.
He's been active. He's been exciting. All but 3 of this guy's fights in the UFC have gone into round 2, whether it was a win or a loss. He's finished fair as I am. That looks awesome in hindsight, going back over 4 years ago. Let's just go back to January of 2023 at UFC 283. He gets knocked out by Ismail Bonfim. He gets submitted, and these were both second-round submissions, against Nazim Saidakov, July 2023. This starts the streak of winning 4 of his last 6. First-round knockout of Mike Breeden. First-round knockout of Brendan Moreau. Gets knocked out by Esteban Rivovic, May of 2024, and now he's won 2 of his last 3, a knockout over Damir Hadzovic, and a first-round submission over Vyacheslav Borshev. So, now his last fight, December of 2025, UFC 323, gets submitted in round 1 by Chris Duncan. So, the question, is Kyle Nelson closer to Slava Claus and Mike Breeden, Eric Gonzalez? Outside of a couple of names, the people that Terrence has finished, that T-Rex has finished, has not been amazing. The people he's lost to have been quite credible. Is Kyle Nelson the kind of guy to respond in kind against T-Rex and get the first round? He was able to knock Bill Algeo out in the first round, but it hasn't been many finishes, 2 knockouts and 5 fights. The other 3 wins were by decision for Kyle Nelson. Look, especially considering Kyle Nelson's, he's only been finished in round 1 once. The other ones were round, 3, 2, and 3. Is he hard to finish early on? Is Steve Garcia special? Kind of. Terrence T-Rex McKinney just comes at you like no one else really does that you could be across the octagon from. I would say this. I don't think round 1 is the only, Terrence T-Rex McKinney might, maybe not, but might eventually win a fight outside of round 1. As crazy as that might sound, even though it's been all of his UFC wins to this point, he might eventually win a fight outside of round 1. I would go T-Rex inside the distance. That's just minus 160. Maybe T-Rex round 2. You get that plus 380. That's not where a lot of people are going to be looking because of, obvious career history. But you got to factor, Kyle Nelson might be a little older and whatnot, but he's proven difficult to finish for a lot of people in round 1. And otherwise, I think Kyle Nelson could respond with his own finish in round 1. I think if this fight goes the distance, and that's very hard to do against Terrence T-Rex McKinney, that's one that very much favors Kyle Nelson. And as far as any of the other rounds, that's anybody's guess. We don't get a great sample size of T-Rex outside of round 1, especially a successful sample size. Kyle Nelson has more ways to win this fight. It's just, can he survive the onslaughts, the early onslaught, and anything that T-Rex might have up his sleeve if it leaks into round 2? So I'd say like T-Rex in round 2, plus 380. I think there's good value. Or I'd go Kyle Nelson, money line, plus 148. Hit it. It's just like Kyle Nelson and T-Rex are a little bit in the same vein where it's like, they've both fought some good fighters and lost, but like the list of fighters they've beaten isn't overly impressive either. So it's hard to say here. Yeah, I definitely think Kyle Nelson's a money line value, and T-Rex, it's just like, there's no way it can continue like this. Like every win being in the first round. He's an animal. He goes out, he tells you what he's going to do. He goes out and he does it, and it either works or it doesn't. So, but as people's careers go on, different things happen. Maybe he has a change of mindset at some point. Maybe Kyle Nelson's toughness just, or, veteran savvy forces him into and I say veteran, like Kyle Nelson actually has less fights in the UFC, it seems, than T-Rex. Kyle Nelson has just a more versatile repertoire to win this fight from round 1, round 2, round 3 to if it goes the distance. I don't know. It's hard. Like when T-Rex is the favorite by this amount, and for him to win inside the distance, it's only minus 160. It's not as bad now that I keep talking, but like I think round 2 plus 380 is still where the best value lies. And like Kyle Nelson has a very good chance to win this fight if he survives the immediate onslaught by T-Rex. That's the case for pretty much anybody that Terrence McKinney fights. Next up, we've got a middleweight matchup between Mansour Abdul Malik and Yusri Belgaroui. Let me consult the UFC rankings real quick for middleweight here. So at middleweight, oh, okay. For some reason, I thought maybe Belgaroui had worked his way into the rankings. It's got to be kind of close. Roman Dolidze just dropped 4 spots to number 15. Joe Pyfer is barely in at number 14. He's in this main event. My God, we need a mass exodus of people retiring for these rankings to make a lot of sense. Anyway, Mansour Abdul Malik, Yusri Belgaroui. Mansour Abdul Malik is the minus 130 favorite. Yusri is the plus 110 underdog. Let's talk about Mansour Abdul Malik first. 9-0-1 as a professional, 6'2", 80-inch reach, born October in 1997. He is, counting the Contender Series, 4-0 and 4-0-1. 4-0-1 in the UFC. He knocked out Wes Schultz in the Contender Series, knocked out Dusko Todorovic, knocked out Nick Klein, and submitted Anthony Tricoli. His only other fight, of course, was a draw that got overturned afterward against Cody Brundage.
I want to tell me what you see. Let's go ahead and see by the fight what you saw in the ring.
Like, I know that it sucks not to get the win against Cody Brundage in a very winnable fight, but Cody Brundage produces weird results. How many times have I said it and so many others? It's interesting. So Mansour Abdul Malik so far, he's faced a couple of like guys well known for knockouts. He's faced a couple of guys that he knew were going to try everything in their power to get on his back and submit him. This is a different stylistic matchup for him. Mansour Abdul Malik has the, obviously this is Dominic Barlow's nickname, but he's got the hand of God, does this guy. He's a physical specimen, has some very impressive, physique measurables at middleweight, 7 wins by knockout, 2 by decision. So all inside the distance, 1-0 in LFA, 1-0 in the Contender Series. And so then to talk about Yusri Belgaroui, 9-3 out of Tunisia as an MMA fighter, 33 years old. He has a 79-inch reach and he is 6'6". The interesting aspects of this matchup for Mansour Abdul Malik become greater. Belgaroui has never lost inside the distance as an MMA fighter. All 3 losses are by decision. He has 7 wins by knockout and 2 wins by decision. Now, He's beaten Azamat Bakoev by knockout. Beat Taiga Iwasaki on the Contender Series by knockout. He was the Levels Fight League light heavyweight champion. And, both of his fights in the UFC and the Contender Series have both been at middleweight. But he's a big dude. He fought on the Contender Series once before and lost by unanimous decision to Marco Tulio. But this is a guy that was a very high-level professional kickboxer. Beat Alex Pereira on an occasion. He fought Israel Adesanya and Alex Pereira multiple times in Glory. Lost by split decision and unanimous decision to Izzy in those two fights. Beat Alex Pereira by unanimous decision, got knocked out by him the two other times he fought. The point is, this guy's a very high-level professional kickboxer. And, it was a rough, stretch there from February 2022 to August of 2023, but he's now won 4 in a row, and that's when he captured the Levels Fight League title, won on the Contender Series in his second try by knockout, and then beat Azamat Bakoev by knockout just last October. And Bakoev at 20-4 as a professional was off wins over Ryan Loder, Zach Reese, and was the LFA champion coming into the UFC. So here's the thing. I am going to say Belgarui here, and I might end up so frustrated by this. But I think that Mansour Abdul-Malik has met a physical challenge in this fight that he hasn't seen before at this level. Mansour Abdul-Malik has never gone the distance. And, the guys that he's fought in the UFC or on the Contender Series, they were either guys that were looking for knockouts for the most part, or they were guys that were looking to, for the love of God, wrap him up, get him down to the ground, and, try to wrap up a rear naked choke or something. This is a very highly skilled kickboxer that is going to be able to, at least counter a lot of what Mansour is going to be looking for in his finishing shots. Belgarui has never even been submitted as an MMA fighter. So I don't think that that's a given. I think it's certainly on the table for Mansour Abdul-Malik, but I think it's far from a given that he'll just be able to wrap up Belgarui and get a guillotine or something. I think that, Belgarui's height is going to make a big difference in preventing that from Mansour. Certainly Mansour is a little better equipped than others to wrap that up on Belgarui, but here, because of those interesting aspects, because of the trouble Mansour had with Cody Brundage, more recently than, Belgarui's struggles as an MMA fighter, because of the things he seems to have worked through as an MMA fighter for this current winning streak, I'm going to say let's go Belgarui. Money line, plus 110, hit it. And I'm kind of upset by this matchup. I would like to see both of these guys work their way up the middleweight rankings. I like both of them. I think they're both very interesting matchups for a lot of different people. I'd like to see growth from both of them. And so very interested to see who ends up the winner in this one. Next up, moving through at a pretty good clip tonight. We got 4 fights left. We got a featherweight matchup between Julian Arosa and Larian Douglas. Larian Douglas is the minus 350 favorite. Julian Arosa, the plus 285 underdog. I forget what this soundbite is.
Oh, God. Take care of your underwears. I'm gonna you, man.
Yeah, so I don't know exactly. I'll say that about the Nara.
Oh, God. Take care of your underwears. I'm gonna you, man.
She's saying that. Sterling's going to say that.
Take care of your underwears. I'm gonna you, man.
Maybe Marcin Tybura.
Take care of your underwears. I'm gonna you, man.
And yeah, that's where I think that sound drop applies. Now that I remember what it was. So, Julian Arosa. Let's start off with the underdog here. Born in 1989, the UFC veteran dating back to 2015. Has had a lot of fights in the UFC. He had 2 fights last year, 2 fights in 2024. He's actually won 3 of his last 4 fights. It looked like it was it wasn't looking good after he got finished in round 1 by Alex Bruce Leroy Caceres and Fernando Padilla, but he bounced back. He submitted Ricardo Ramos, he submitted Christian Rodriguez, and he knocked out Darren Elkins. And now he's coming off a unanimous decision loss to Mel Costa, May of 2025, getting outstruck 102-69. They each had, a few takedowns between them. But Mel Costa, since he beat Julian Arosa, also went on to finish, not be by decision, but finish Morgan Charrier and Dan Ige. So the loss to Mel Costa is hardly the death sentence that we thought it was at the time. Now, Larian Douglas, 13-5 as a professional, 30 years old. 7 wins by knockout, 2 by submission, 3 by decision, 2 losses by knockout, 2 by submission, 1 by decision. So 4 of his 5 professional losses are inside the distance. 4-1 in LFA. Let's see, when was he in LFA? So he lost to Isaac Thompson by knockout in LFA, August of 2023. But he has won 5 fights in a row, a knockout over Ivan Tina at LFA 172, knockouts over Nathan Garib and Javier Reyes at LFA 184 and LFA 190. Knocked out Elijah Johns to defend, I believe it was to defend. Yeah, he was the interim featherweight champion. And then won the outright LFA featherweight championship over Elijah Johns by second round knockout January 2025. Then beat Cam Teague by first round knockout on the Contender Series last September. So, I mean, this is a real UFC debut. Cam Teague, as I'm loading here, on the Contender Series was a plus 480 underdog to Larian Douglas and didn't have the most impressive professional pedigree going into the UFC or going into the Contender Series. Like Julian Erosa decision. He got knocked out by Padilla and Bruce Leroy, got knocked out by Songwoo Choi, got knocked out by Julio Arce, got knocked out by Devontae Smith, got knocked out by Teruto Ishihara. Yeah, I mean, like hasn't been submitted in the UFC. The overwhelming majority of his losses in the UFC have been by knockout with a few decisions sprinkled in. Larian Douglas is on a great knockout streak. I think that if you're going Larian Douglas here, go by knockout. And part of that is betting on the fact that Erosa is coming off a loss to a guy that in hindsight we know like that's not that bad of a loss, but the clock keeps ticking on Erosa and he has a lot of fight mileage on him. Larian Douglas by knockout is minus 175. That's better than minus 350. You could also, do a method of victory double champ by decision or by knockout. It might not be that much worse. The spread is minus 250 for Douglas to cover 3.5. So no. So I would go Douglas by knockout. I think that's the most logical thing. Like that's how you end up beating Erosa most of the time. Douglas is younger. He's on a fantastic knockout streak. The competition has been quite reputable for the most part. And, if I'm going to Erosa, you could go plus 285. That's very fair. Or you could go DeRosa inside the distance. That's plus 300. It's surprisingly not that much better than money line. So maybe just money line plus 285. Or Julian Erosa certainly has a chance. When you're talking about a guy making his UFC debut and you're talking about a guy who has as much experience as Erosa does, and for the most part, won 3 of his last 4 fights and, not against pushover dudes. Maybe dudes not in their prime anymore. Maybe dudes not at the top of that weight class, but dudes that when you beat them, I don't roll my eyes at. So Erosa certainly has a chance in this fight, but all the momentum seems to be swinging towards Larian Douglas. And, Mel Costa not getting the knockout, I don't think has any bearing here because Mel Costa can win a fight anyway, recently that he chooses. He's just a good, opportunistic, well-rounded fighter. Next up, 3 fights left. We got a retirement fight here between Michael Chiesa and Nico Price. And as weird as this fight is, and maybe is like, I don't know, how many times you got to see Nico Price in this spot? And I'm glad that you get to see a send-off for Michael Chiesa. They certainly make a bigger deal of the guys that are involved in like the media aspect, as they're retiring. Sure. Chiesa is the minus 800 favorite. Nico Price, the plus 550 underdog.
Oh, God. Take care of your underwears. I'm gonna you, man.
Let's talk about Nico Price first. So He has won 2 fights since October of 2019 out of. So after he beat James Vick, there's been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 fights. 2 wins, 1 no contest in that one. The no contest that was overturned was against Donald Cerrone. Got knocked out by Vicente Luque. Lost by decision of Michel Pereira. Knocked out by Phil Rowe. Knocked out by Robbie Lawler in his retirement fight. By decision at Thimba Garimba. Got taken down 7 times in that fight. Submitted by Jacoby Smith and knocked out by Nikolai Veretennikov. The 1 win, or the 2 wins, his 2 wins ago was October of 2021 for him. Those 2 wins were over Alex Oliveira by decision and over Alex Morono by decision. Michael Chiesa, born in 1987. He is approaching 40 years old, as is, Nico Price is a couple years younger, but still. Michael Chiesa has now won 3 in a row, dating back to August of 2024. And he had that 3-fight losing streak to Vicente Luque, Sean Brady, and Kevin Holland. So already, like, Nico Price has been fed to some people, but Michael Chiesa has been put in more competitive matchups. You go back a handful of years, like he beat RDA January of 2020. That's still this decade. Beat Neil Magny this decade. Got Darce choked by Vicente Luque and Kevin Holland. Lost by decision to Sean Brady. Wasn't that bad of a performance. 29-28 on all 3 judges' scorecards. That wasn't even that long ago. I mean, that's now, it's close to like 4.5 years ago. In Michael Chiesa years, it's not that bad. But he submitted Tony Ferguson, he submitted Max Griffin, and he beat Court McGee by unanimous decision. Like, Nico Price, how many times has he been submitted? Got submitted by Jacoby Smith. Most of the time he's been knocked out, and he's been knocked out a good amount, but he got Darce choked by Vicente Luque too. Plenty of losses by decision. I think maybe like the fights against Jacoby Smith and Thimba Garimbo, those are kind of the places to look for how I think this one ends up most likely going. Nico Price, like, unless he can knock out Michael Chiesa or just completely avoids getting taken down, and Michael Chiesa has, the last time he got knocked out in the UFC, and I think the only time, was September of 2014 against Joe Lozon. Don't forget the amount, like the greater amount of killers that Chiesa has fought and beaten. Nico Price has mostly lost to the good fighters that he has faced in the UFC. It's been like his job, unfortunately. Not to say he hasn't had some awesome highlights in the meantime. So I would say give this, how many times has Michael Chiesa ever won by knockout in the UFC? Never. So look, one guy's about to be 40. These guys are both on their way out. Nico Price has been, a sacrificial lamb for quite some time now. Don't go crazy on this one. I would say like Chiesa to win by decision is plus 265. To win by submission is minus 145. It's not that easy to beat Nico Price by submission historically. So if I was taking one of these, I would go Michael Chiesa by decision plus 265, hit it, and, take a look at method of victory double chance with decision and submission, see if that's a respectable number, with submission being minus 145. I think that a lot more credit is given to Chiesa being able to finish this fight by submission when that just that hasn't proven the easiest over time. Jacoby Smith was able to do it to Nico Price recently, but Jacoby Smith is, a lot younger, has been a finishing machine in the UFC, younger, more explosive, more athletic. It's a different matchup. So I think by decision is actually the better value there for Michael Chiesa. And now we are to the co-main event of the evening, making good time tonight. And we've got a women's flyweight matchup between Alexa Grasso and Macy Barber. Alexa Grasso, the former women's flyweight champion, is the plus 160 underdog. Macy Barber, the minus 185 favorite. Well, let's talk about Alexa Grasso, the underdog, first. So, born in 1993, she has not won since she beat Valentina Shevchenko for the UFC title March of 2023. So she was on that 5-fight winning streak. And it kind of, it had been a bit of a roller coaster in the UFC up until that 5-fight winning streak. Winning, going win, loss, win, loss, win, loss to Carla Esparza. And by the way, obviously that one was at strawweight. The Yi Jian Kim fight was when she was at flyweight, and then the success started coming. She beats Kim by decision. Macy Barber, the first time, by decision. In a close fight where the scorecards ended up being 29-28 on all three judges' scorecards. Alexa Grasso didn't get a single takedown, ended up with a little bit more control time. And the significant strikes battle was very close too, 40-38 in total. Just so happened that Alexa Grasso landed more of those significant strikes in round 1 and round 2, and Macy Barber had a good round 3. And very little ground strikes thrown by either of them. Important to note. So then she submits Joanne Wood, beats Viviane Araújo by unanimous decision, then submits Valentina Shevchenko to become the UFC Women's Flyweight Champion. It ends up a draw in the rematch, and then she gets thoroughly beaten in the third fight with Valentina Shevchenko, taken down 18 times, outstruck. It was 50-45 on all three judges' scorecards.
Oh, God.
Take care of your underwears. I'm gonna you, man.
And now she's coming off a unanimous decision loss to Natalia Silva, losing 30-27 on all three judges' scorecards. Statistically, it wasn't that bad. Look, Natalia Silva, 25-1, undefeated in the UFC, with wins over Jasmine Jasudavicius, Andrea Lee, Jessica Andrade, Alexa Grasso, and now Thug Rose Namajunas. Losing to Natalia Silva is by no means a shameful thing. The two losses that she's had since she's become a flyweight have been Natalia Silva and Valentina Shevchenko. Natalia Silva very well might be, could end up being the UFC Women's Flyweight Champion very soon. Now, Macy Barber, born in 1998, so she's about 5 years younger. And, consider that she was born in 1998 when she fought Alexa Grasso the first time over 5 years ago. So if you were born in 1998, 20. So she was like 23 when they first fought. And it was a close fight then. Macy Barber, her last loss. She has 2 losses in the UFC, 2 losses as a professional. The first one came 4 fights into the UFC after she had finished Jamie Colleen, Hannah Cyphers, JJ Aldrich, and Jillian Robertson all in a row. Then she loses to Roxanne Modafferi by decision. Her most recent loss, if you're following along with me and doing the math, by decision to Alexa Grasso over 5 years ago at UFC 258. That was her last loss. Since then, she has won 7 fights in a row, all by decision. So she came in knocking everybody out. Loses a couple, grew a little older, and she's still young. Born in 1998, she's been improving all this time. And, they weren't all by decision. She did knock out Amanda Ribas. But it was decisions over Miranda Maverick, over Montana De La Rosa, over Jessica Ai, over Andrea Lee. A couple of those were splits. She knocks out Amanda Ribas. She beats Caitlin Sermonaro by decision. And she beats Karine Silva by unanimous decision. That is an ascending group of competition. Beating all those people in a row is no easy task. And your last loss was when you were 23, 5 years ago, and now you get an opportunity to avenge it. And it was a close fight then. You were 1 round away from getting that win. And you came into the UFC knocking out 4 people in a row to include a, I get that.
I want to tell me what you see. Let's go ahead and see by the fight what you saw in the ring.
To include a veteran like JJ Aldrich and someone like Jillian Robertson, who now is on a 5-fight winning streak of her own. I see why the momentum has trended towards Macy being a -185 favorite. That makes a lot of sense. Now, Alexa Grasso hasn't been finished in the UFC. She's been finished once, and that was all the way back in May of 2018. She got submitted by Tatiana Suarez, who is good at that, a very good grappler. Macy Barber's a well-rounded fighter. And she's shown that she can win really close decisions. We know that she has finishing power. She just hasn't needed to use it lately. She took down Caitlin Sermonara, formerly Caitlin Chukagian, 4 times. She got taken down by 5 times by Andrea Lee. Didn't matter. She still got the split decision. Got outstruck by Miranda Maverick. Didn't matter. She still ended up getting the split decision. 5 years later, Macy Barber still just like, or not, Macy Barber. She's gonna be she's 27 right now, gonna be 28 here in a couple of months. I think this is the one that she gets back, and unfortunately piles on top for Alexa Grasso, who, like, over the last couple of fights, it's not just that she lost, and you could look past that because she lost to one of the greatest champions, let alone female champions of all time, and someone who could be a future champion not too far down the road. But she didn't look herself. She didn't look ready. She didn't look like her head was in there the whole time. She didn't look very motivated. She kind of looked a little lost, and like that she just wasn't all the way there through the whole course of the fight. That's a real dangerous place to be if you're going to be fighting Macy Barber, who is well on her way up the UFC flyweight rankings. I would say because it's been a while since Macy's gotten a knockout, and because Alexa Grasso has never been knocked out in the UFC. She's been submitted once. Now is against someone as skilled in that department against Tatiana Suarez. Valentina never finished her. Natalia Silva didn't finish her. And those are two people certainly capable of getting knockouts or submit whatever it is. I'll go Macy Barber. Minus 185 money line isn't horrible, but otherwise I would go Barber by decision plus 110. And I think that because of both of their career histories, Macy Barber to win this by split decision plus 600 isn't a horrible leap to make either. I it'd be it'd be rough to see Alexa Grasso lose another one in a row and then wonder like what is next for her, and especially like, and more importantly, how she looks doing it. But it would be very exciting for Macy Barber to get this win. And then it's like, again, we have a few people right there at the top of the women's flyweight division that could easily justify a title shot. So it definitely would be more exciting to me if Macy Barber ends up getting the win. And now, folks, we are to the main event of the evening.
I want to tell me what you see. Let's go ahead and see by the fight what you saw in the ring.
And we have a middleweight main event between Israel Adesanya, the minus 150 favorite, and Joe Pyfer, the plus 130 underdog. Let's start with Joe Pyfer. All right. People don't like him. He doesn't exactly have the most magnetic personality. 15-3 as a pro. Hilariously lost his first fight on the Contender Series to Dustin Stoltzfus, got knocked out. Then wins 4 fights in a row. His second trip on the Contender Series, he knocks out Ozzy Diaz. Then he gets 3 straight finishes over Alan Amandovsky, Gerald Mearshart, and Abdul Razak Al Hassan. Okay. All of a certain tier of middleweight for sure. Then he gets a big step up. Fights Jack Hermanson, loses by unanimous decision in a fight night main event over the course of 5 rounds. Loses 48-47 on all 3 judges' scorecards. He, made some stuff work early and then slowly faded as the fight went on. That is a concerning point here. He has since gone the distance with Kelvin Gastelum. He got 2 knockdowns in that fight. It was 30-27, 29-27, and 29-28 on the 3 judges' scorecards. Kelvin Gastelum had his opportunities to win that fight in round 3. In fact, let's just see what the 3rd round numbers looked like here. So Kelvin Gastelum did have his best round in round 3. Obviously, a notoriously hard guy to finish. Pyfer probably had it was very consistent over the course of those 3 rounds, I will say. He landed 1 or 2 takedowns against Kelvin. Kelvin wasn't able to get one. And now he's coming off a 2nd round rear naked choke against Abus Magomedov. So, and he knocked out MAB after he fought Jack Hermanson. 6'2", 75-inch reach. And now Israel Adesanya, the last style bender, will be 2 inches taller. Will have a 5-inch reach advantage. Izzy, despite seeming like such a young gun, still in his style, the way he is, everything except for the way that he like talks about his career. Born in July 1989, not young at all, and he's lost 3 fights in a row. His last win was April of 2023 when he knocked out Alex Pereira to reclaim the UFC middleweight title. What do you say about the former champion kickboxer who was the long reigning middleweight champion? Gave it a good go, moving up to light heavyweight, way undersized and fighting Jan Blachowicz, came up short, then returned, beat Marvin Vettori, beat Robert Whitaker, beat Jared Cannonier, lost his middleweight title to Alex Pereira, then exercised those demons in his second UFC fight with him. Now he's lost 3 fights in a row. He lost the middleweight title in that big upset loss at UFC 293 to Sean Strickland. We're still kind of coming out of that era, and we'll see if Sean Strickland can reclaim middleweight gold here this year. He got submitted by Dricus du Plessis, and then he lost by knockout to Nasruddin Imavov. So one obvious advantage here is experience against a high level of competition and successful experience over the course of 5 rounds. What did I say? Is he minus 150? You lose to Sean Strickland by decision, who has gone on to knock out Anthony Hernandez, beat Paulo Costa, had a split decision loss to Dricus du Plessis. You got submitted by Dricus on, in the middle of his middleweight title run, when Dricus, he was tearing a hole through everybody in that stretch of time. The only person that he didn't was against Hamzat, or, beat, tear a hole through, whatever. And then Nasruddin Imavov, who, let's see, that was 2 fights ago for Imavov. And, since then, he set himself apart among middleweight prospects, at least set himself apart from Cal Barallo in their fight September of 2025, beating him by unanimous decision. He knocked out Jared Cannonier. That's not an easy thing to do either. He beat Brendan Allen in that stretch, and he beat Roman Dolidze by majority decision. So weird, considering that we saw Roman Dolidze just dive and pray against Christian Leroy Duncan this past weekend. This spot, a main event, 5 rounds, obviously favors Israel Adesanya. Joe Pyfer has gone the distance since then. It was a successful run against Kelvin Gastelum, who, by the way, if we're talking about Kelvin Gastelum leading up to the Joe Pyfer fight, he had lost 3 of his last 4. The only wins coming against Chris Curtis and Daniel Rodriguez by unanimous decision. It's obviously not Kelvin Gastelum's heyday. Abus Magomedov finishing him, that's an all right win. He was coming off 3 straight wins over Warley Alves, Bruno Ferreira, and Michel Pereira. Has lost to Sean Strickland and Cal Barello before. So it's just like, this is a massive step up for Joe Pyfer. And this would be a stinger of a fight to lose. Because, obviously he was born in 1996, 7 years after. He's on his way up. Israel Adesanya is admittedly kind of on the way out. He says a lot of things about how he might want to end his career. But for Israel Adesanya, it can't be much more to it. So this would be a stinger of a loss for Joe Pyfer, especially right there teetering at the edge of the middleweight rankings. I'm not convinced on Joe Pyfer. He will have to show a lot of improvement here. Your best bet is trying to, wrap up a submission, get a rear naked choke here like Dricus was able to do. Now, Dricus had to do it in round 4 against Israel Adesanya in a fight that was going well for Israel, competitively so up until that point, at least in the stand-up department. Nasruddin Imavov has similar dimensions to Joe Pyfer. It's just like I trust what Nasruddin Imavov has done in the UFC more than Joe Pyfer. It's not just I have found Izzy's trash talk corny for years, but Izzy's someone that grows on you over time, especially in this period of time. I love Israel Adesanya. I love to look back on his time as a UFC champion. Joe Pyfer is not that popular. A lot of that's his own doing, but that's a form of marketability in its own right. I I think the fighter that if I was gonna go with a method of victory here, I would have to go like Pyfer inside the distance makes a lot more sense if he was able to get Izzy down and get an arm triangle, a rear naked choke, something like that. It's going to be really hard to just get up close to Israel Adesanya, not being as aesthetically as skilled a striker, Joe Pyfer as compared to Israel, and end up getting a knockout. It's been very hard to knock out Israel Adesanya over the years, and that's why, we give credit to Nasruddin Imavov for doing it. The fact that it's 5 rounds, the fact that it's a main event, it's a big step up for Joe Pyfer. He will have to defy his career history to come up big in this opportunity. And, he almost let some things slip even in his 3-round fight with Kelvin Gastelum. So there is a route to victory for Joe Pyfer for sure. But I think Israel Adesanya, money line -150 is the most reasonable thing to do in this main event. Hit it. Folks, that is all 13 fights for UFC Seattle. Now stick around and I'll put together a couple of DraftKings lineups. Sorry. I would love to have this prepared, but I'm afraid that having this open with UFC stats and Tapology or whatever would make my computer have to go to Advanced Auto Shop or whatever the hell. So logging in real quick. Listen to this for a second.
I want to tell me what you see. Let's go ahead and see by the fight what you saw in the ring.
Okay, let's share the old screen, which will also make my computer feel like it's been hitting the balls. Probably time for a new one of these kind of soon, but I like to put that off. I took the bar exam on a computer on its last legs. It's going to take a lot more than that to get me to buy a new laptop and have to transfer all my stuff over or whatever. People have told me it's very easy, but I am resistant to technological change because I'm scared of anything. I just don't want to do it. So let's start off with this lineup. Let's start off with Izzy at 8,500. Then let's go Casey O'Neill at 7,800. And let's go Kyle Nelson at 7,500. Let's go Belgarui at 8,000. I have 9,100 on average left to work with here. Let's go Macy Barber at 8,800. And let's go Ignacio Bahamondes at 9,200, even though I have $200 remaining. Whatever. Enter. And I will go ahead and make one lineup with Joe Pyfer. See how that works out. If I don't like it as I'm building it, I will scrap it and do another one with Izzy. All right, so Pyfer is 7,700. I'll go Casey O'Neill at 78 again. Let's go Belgarui at 8,000. Let's go Bahamondes at 9,200. Let's go Macy Barber at 8,800. Doesn't shake out the best now, does it? Let's scrap Macy. What's Macy's scoring like over these wins? Yeah, I mean, she has some wins that are lower in the scoring totem pole, so maybe not Macy here. Navajo Sterling's only had one triple-digit DFS performance. How about Thainara? 2 triple digits. I will go Thainara at 9,600. I have 7,700 left. I will just go ahead and do Kyle Nelson at 7,500. Again, $200 remaining. So the two lineups I just put together. First one, using Israel Adesanya, Izzy, Macy Barber, Belgarui, Casey O'Neill, Kyle Nelson, Ignacio Bahamondes, $200 remaining. The other ones, starting with Joe Pyfer, giving them one each. Belgarui, Casey O'Neill, Kyle Nelson, Alexia Nara, and Ignacio Bahamondes, also $200 remaining. Folks, that is it for episode 205 of the Tap That MMA podcast. Again, go check out King Arthur Capital Group. Follow them on Instagram. Very proud to have partnered the podcast with them and David McElroy. Follow me on Twitter at RotoBrady. Follow the podcast at Tap That MMA Podcast on YouTube and Spotify. Also available on Apple Podcasts and Amazon Music. Follow me on Instagram at RotoBrady MMA. Check out my recent interlude episode with David King, Arthur McElroy. Keep an eye out for the interlude episodes, the very exciting ones I have on the books for this Sunday, so should be coming out some point next week. Look out for my MMA DFS Values Picks article that comes out on Friday through RotoBaller, and look out for my UFL betting articles that come out through RotoBaller if you're getting excited for the spring football season that starts what will now be today, Friday, March 27th. Have yourselves a great weekend. Enjoy the college basketball postseason that remains. Tune in for UFC Seattle at 5 p.m. Eastern Time on Saturday. Have yourselves a great weekend. Glad to be back, making good time this time. And peace.
I want to tell me what you see. Let's go ahead and see by the fight what you saw in the ring.
Full call.
Take care of your underwears. I'm gonna you, man.